So the woodcutters themselves purchased clothing or bartered for clothing from the town. Some made their own clothing from fabrics that were available for purchase in town. The fashions weren't fashions per se, they were functional clothing. The men wore wide-brimmed hats to protect their faces from the sun. They wore leather shoes, or leather boots rather, to protect their feet from the thorny undergrowth of the forest, as well as snakes and insects and so on. I know they all wore suspenders because belts weren't easily available at that time. Obviously suspenders to keep their trousers up. And the clothing was rough cotton. No particular style other than what was available at that time. And like I said before, it was influenced by the colonialism or the colonialists that moved to this area, as well as the Dutch settlers. The children themselves wore hand-me-downs quite often from their parents or from their families. Those were adjusted by the people who, or the mothers primarily as well. And then the indigenous people of Knysna themselves wore, from what I understood, clothing made from the skins of animals that were slaughtered. There isn't much available information on that, which is a pity because it's a very interesting subject. I'd also like to just touch on the hippie era, which was quite pronounced in Knysna. In fact, at one stage there were more hippies living in Knysna than there were anywhere else in South Africa. The hippies generally wore tie-dyed, bright clothing, a lot of which was made by themselves, obviously dyed by themselves, using natural dyes that could be found within the forest. Psychedelia was the in thing at the time, so obviously bright colors and vivid patterns. The children also wore what the parents wore, quite often hand-me-downs or things that were made. I know that the hippies also knitted jerseys and waistcoats and things like that from yarn that they had harvested from their own sheep and dyed themselves as well. And that's all I have really right now. This is a little bit of my story of the history of clothing in Knysna. Okay.